It started with a phone ringing at the worst possible moment. That's all it was. Just a call. And I remember thinking, who even calls anymore? People text. People leave voicemails. But this one felt different, even before I answered it. My name is Nova. I'm 60 years old. And the truth is, by the time that phone rang, life had already taken more from me than I ever talk about out loud. If you're listening right now, stay with me. Not because something shocking happens right away. It doesn't. But because what starts as nothing sometimes becomes everything. I didn't know it then. I couldn't have known. But that sound, one simple ring, was about to split my life into before and after. I live alone now. Small house. Quiet street. The kind of place where the loudest thing most days is the refrigerator humming at night. I used to hate the silence. After my husband passed, it felt heavy, like the house was holding its breath. These days I've made peace with it. Or at least I tell myself I have. That morning I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a stack of unopened mail. Bills mostly. Medical statements I didn't fully understand. A retirement account summary that never looks as comforting as it should. 60 is a strange age. You're supposed to feel settled, wise, safe. But no one tells you how exposed you can feel when the safety net isn't as strong as you hoped. The phone rang. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something in me hesitated. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that quiet voice inside that says, answer it just in case. So I did. Hello, I said, already bracing myself for a scam, a survey, someone trying to sell me something I didn't need. The voice on the other end sounded calm. Polite. Professional. Too professional if I'm being honest. He used my full name. First and last. Pronounced correctly. That should have been my first red flag. But when you're 60 and someone sounds like they know what they're doing, you don't immediately assume danger. You assume order, structure, authority. He said he was calling about unusual activity. Not alarming, not urgent, just unusual. The way he said it made it feel like he was doing me a favor. I leaned against the counter and listened. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to listen when someone speaks with confidence? How your shoulders relax when they sound like they have answers you don't? He asked if I had a moment. I did. I always do. Before I go any further, let me say this softly. If stories like this matter to you, if you've ever felt that quiet knot of worry about money, about trust, about getting older in a world that moves too fast, you might want to stay connected here. Not because I need anything from you, but because stories like mine, they don't get told enough. And sometimes just knowing you're not alone changes how heavy things feel. I didn't know then that this conversation would stretch longer than it should have. That each minute would pull me deeper into a sense of false safety. But I trusted him, and trust, when misplaced, doesn't break loudly. It slips. He didn't rush me. That was the clever part. He spoke slowly, like time was on his side. Asked me about my day. Asked if I was comfortable. It felt human, familiar, almost kind. I remember glancing at the window. Sunlight on the floor. Dust floating in the air. Everything looked normal. That's how these moments get you. Nothing around you looks like danger. He mentioned a charge I didn't recognize. A small one. The kind you might miss if you weren't paying attention. I frowned. I told him I hadn't made it. He nodded. Well, I imagined him nodding and said that's why he was calling. You see how easy that is. Someone explains your confusion before you even fully feel it. He said there were steps we could take. Simple steps, protective steps. He said my account was safe. For now, that phrase stayed with me. For now, my heart sped up just a little. Not panic. Not yet. Just enough to make me lean in. He asked me to verify a few things. Basic things. Things anyone who actually works with accounts would already have, but when you're on the phone, you don't think that way. You think in fragments. In reassurance, I told myself, it's fine. This is responsible. This is what careful people do. I gave him information I shouldn't have. Not all at once. Piece by piece. And every time I hesitated, he filled the silence with understanding. Silence is dangerous, especially when someone knows how to guide it. At one point I laughed. actually laughed. I said, "I'm probably being overly cautious." He said, "That's exactly why this is staying under control." That line, that one sentence. It wrapped around my fear and called it wisdom. Have you ever trusted someone because they reflected back the version of you that you want to believe in? We talked about security, about fraud, about how common it's become. He said people my age are often targeted because we're assumed to be less tech savvy. I felt a flicker of pride. He was including me in the or where group, not the vulnerable one. I told him I handled my finances carefully, that I always had. That was my first confession. Quiet, unintentional. I needed him to see me as competent. When the call ended, I felt relieved. That's the part no one expects. I didn't feel shaken, I felt protected. Like I had done something right. I made myself tea, sat down, took a breath. If you had asked me then, I would have said nothing happened. Just a call, just a precaution. But later that afternoon, something nudged at the back of my mind. A subtle discomfort. The kind you can ignore if you want to. I told myself not to overthink it. Overthinking is what anxious people do. I wasn't anxious. I was fine. That evening I checked my balance. Not because I was worried. Just because I always check. Routine. Habit. The number looked wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not empty. Just different enough to make my stomach tighten. I refreshed the page. Logged out. Logged back in. Same number. I whispered, "No," to an empty room. Not loud. Just enough to hear myself. This is the moment where fear wants to take over. But something else happened first. Denial. I told myself there had to be an explanation. A delay. A system update. Anything but the truth forming in my chest. I didn't call anyone. I sat there. Quiet. Staring. And here's the thing I don't admit easily. In that moment, I wasn't just scared about money. I was scared about being wrong. About having been fooled. About proving every stereotype I thought I'd escaped. I went to bed that night without answers. Sleep didn't come easily. Thoughts looped. What did I say? What did I share? What did I miss? At some point, I asked myself a question that still echoes when rooms get quiet. When did being polite become more important than being safe? The next morning, I woke up determined to fix it. Fix implies control. Control implies hope. I called the number back. Disconnected. That's when the weight shifted. When the story stopped being a story and started being something else entirely. I sat at the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, and felt something crack open inside me. Not panic yet. Something deeper. A slow realization forming. This wasn't over. And if you think this is the part where everything is revealed, it isn't. Not yet. Because the hardest moments don't arrive with alarms. They arrive quietly, while you're still telling yourself you're okay. Before I continue, let me ask you something. If you were in my place right now, would you tell someone? Or would you try to handle it alone, just a little longer? Because that choice, that pause, that's where things truly begin to change. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone again, and stepped into a day that would force me to see myself and the world very differently. And that's where I'll stop for now. Not because there's nothing more to say, but because what comes next deserves your full attention. If this already feels familiar, if a part of you is leaning forward without knowing why, stay with me. The next part isn't just about what was taken. It's about what I almost lost that day and didn't even realize was at risk. I didn't tell anyone that morning. Not my daughter. Not my sister. Not even the friend who checks on me every Sunday. I told myself I just needed clarity first. Answers before emotion. Facts before fear. That's how we justify silence. I called my bank directly, using the number printed on the back of my card. My hands were steady, which surprised me. My voice sounded normal, too normal for someone whose chest felt like it was slowly filling with water. The woman who answered was kind. Not overly kind, just professional. She asked me to verify my identity. I did. Then she paused. That pause was longer than any sentence she spoke. Have you ever felt time stretch in a moment like that? Like the world is holding its breath with you? She said my name softly, the way people do when they're about to tell you something you won't like. She said there had been multiple transfers. Not pending, completed. She said they were flagged, but by the time the system reacted, the money was already gone. Gone is such a small word for something that carries so much weight. I asked how much. She told me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even gasp. My body did something strange instead. It went cold. Not shivering cold. Empty cold. I thanked her. That part still haunts me. I thanked her like she just helped me schedule an appointment. When the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wood grain like it might rearrange itself into an explanation. I thought about all the years that money represented. The careful saving. The saying no. The nights I stayed in when others went out. The quiet pride of being responsible. And just like that, it felt erased. This is the part people don't talk about enough. It's not just financial loss. It's identity loss. You don't just lose money. You lose the version of yourself that believed you were careful, alert, protected. I finally told my daughter. I tried to keep my voice light. I said it like an update, not a confession. But she heard it anyway. Children always do. She was angry. Not at me. At them. At the world. At the fact that this could still happen to someone who did everything right. Her anger made me feel smaller. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone and replayed the call again and again. Every word, every pause, every moment I chose trust over instinct. And then came the shame. Shame is quiet. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It says, you should have known better. It says, you're 60, not naive. It says, don't tell anyone else. I almost listened. For days, I moved through life like nothing had changed. I smiled at neighbors. I cooked dinner. I watched TV shows I didn't really follow. But inside, something was unraveling. I kept thinking about that man's voice. How calm it was. How patient. How human. That's when the self-realization hit me hard and uninvited. This wasn't about intelligence. This wasn't about age. This was about loneliness. He didn't just steal money. He filled a space first. He listened. He slowed down. He made me feel seen, and that truth hurt more than the number on the screen. I confessed that to myself one night, out loud, sitting in the dark. I said, I just wanted to feel like someone was looking out for me. Saying it broke something open. And strangely, it also softened something. I started researching, not obsessively, intentionally. I learned how these scams work, how they build trust before they take anything, how they target moments of vulnerability, not stupidity. Pain turned into reflection. I called my bank again. I filed reports. I spoke to people whose jobs exist because this happens every day. Hearing that didn't make it okay, but it made it less isolating. One woman told me, you'd be surprised how many strong, capable people this happens to. I believed her. Because I was one of them. Some money was recovered. Not all. Enough to breathe again, not enough to forget. But here's what surprised me most. Once the fear settled, something else appeared, clarity. I started talking about it, carefully at first, then more openly, and every time I did, someone leaned in and said, that almost happened to me. Or my mom went through something similar. Or, I got a call like that last week. Stories stacked on stories. That's when hope crept in. Not loud hope, quiet hope, the kind that says, maybe this pain can mean something. If you're listening to this on our channel right now, if you've ever ignored a gut feeling because someone sounded convincing, pause for a second. Just ask yourself, when was the last time you trusted your discomfort instead of dismissing it? I'm not here to warn you with rules. I'm here to remind you of something softer and stronger. Your instincts are not outdated. Your caution is not weakness. And your story doesn't end where the loss begins. In the next part, I'll tell you what happened when I stopped hiding the truth and how one conversation changed the way I see myself, money, and trust forever. Because the balance that changed that day wasn't just in my bank account. And maybe, if you stay with me a little longer, you'll see why this story might be yours too. I didn't plan for the truth to change me. I thought it would just explain things, close a chapter. Let me move on quietly, but truth doesn't work like that. The first time I told the full story out loud was not in a dramatic setting, no spotlight, no big moment. Just a small community room with folding chairs and bad coffee. A local workshop my daughter insisted I attend. Just listen, she said. You don't have to speak. I sat in the back. Of course I did. People shared their experiences. Different voices, different ages, different lives. A retired teacher, a single father, a woman younger than my own daughter. The details were different, but the pattern was the same. Trust, then loss. Confidence, then silence. And as I listened, something inside me shifted. For the first time since that call, I didn't feel alone in it. Near the end, the facilitator asked if anyone wanted to add something. I didn't raise my hand. My body did something before my mind caught up. I stood. My voice shook at first, then steadied. I said my name. I said my age. I said I thought I was careful. I said I wasn't stupid. And then I said the part that still tightens my throat. I didn't lose money because I was careless. I lost it because I was human. The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet, respectful quiet. Afterward, people came up to me. They thanked me. Some hugged me. One woman cried and said she'd been too ashamed to tell anyone until she heard me speak. That's when the emotional reset happened. I realized something important. Shame survives in silence. It feeds on secrecy. But the moment you give it air, it weakens. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. I started doing something new after that. Before answering calls, before clicking links, before reacting to urgency, I paused, just a breath, just long enough to ask myself, why does this feel rushed? That pause became powerful. I also started checking in on myself in other ways. Calling friends instead of scrolling. Asking for help instead of pretending I didn't need it. Letting people show up for me. Pain slowly made room for reflection. Reflection made room for hope. I shared my story once on this channel, just briefly, not knowing how it would land. I almost backed out. But I remembered the woman who cried in that room. I remembered how much it mattered to feel seen. The response surprised me. Messages from people who said, "This felt like you were talking to me." Comments from viewers who shared their own close calls. Not for sympathy. For connection. That's when I understood the real value hidden inside this experience. It wasn't the money that came back. It was my voice. If you're still listening right now, let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to slow down? To question urgency? To say, "I'll check and call back"? We're taught that quick responses mean competence. But sometimes delay is wisdom. I won't pretend everything magically fixed itself. Some nights are still heavy, some moments still sting. But the fear no longer controls the story. In the final part, I'll tell you about the call that came weeks later. A very different call. One I almost didn't answer. And how that moment closed a loop I didn't even know was open. Stay with me. Not because of what happens next, but because of what it might unlock in you. The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, nothing dramatic about it. No ominous music moment. Just a regular ring while I was folding laundry, sunlight coming in through the kitchen window, the hum of the refrigerator in the background. Ordinary life doing what it always does, moving forward whether you're ready or not. For a second, my chest tightened. That feeling never fully goes away, by the way. It just gets quieter. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. My first instinct was to let it ring. That old fear whispered, "Not again." You don't owe anyone an answer. Protect your peace. But something else whispered too. A calmer voice. The one I'd been practicing listening to. It said, "You're not the same person anymore." So I answered, "Hello. This is Nova." The voice on the other end was steady, professional, no rush, no pressure. They introduced themselves clearly, explained why they were calling, and then said something that immediately set them apart. You don't need to decide anything right now. If you'd like, you can hang up, verify this number independently, and call us back later. I almost laughed. Do you know how rare that sounds when you've lived through what I lived through? We spoke for only a few minutes. No personal details exchanged, no urgency. When we hung up, I sat there quietly, phone in my hand, realizing something important. This call didn't scare me. And that's when it hit me. The real ending of this story wasn't about a scam, or a bank balance, or even recovery. It was about trust, rebuilt slowly, carefully, on my terms. I called my daughter later and told her what happened. She smiled and said, "Mom, you sound lighter." And she was right. I did, not because something good happened, but because something bad no longer had power over me. I want to pause here for a second, just a soft pause. Because if you're watching this, there's a reason. Maybe you've had a call that didn't sit right. Maybe you ignored your gut once. Maybe you're carrying quiet embarrassment about something you never told anyone. Let me say this clearly, without judgment. Your story isn't over because of one moment. Your intelligence isn't erased by one mistake. Your worth was never tied to a number on a screen. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Not what happened, but what you learned from it. Or even just a single word that describes how it made you feel. Sometimes naming the feeling is the first step to releasing it. And if you know someone, your parent, your friend, someone who trusts too easily or blames themselves too harshly, share this with them. Not to scare them, to remind them they're not alone. I share stories like this on this channel because they don't end when the video does. They continue in conversations, in awareness, in small pauses before big decisions. And if this channel has ever made you feel understood, even once, that's more than enough reason for me to keep speaking. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If the same call came today, would you answer it differently? Not with fear, but with clarity. Think about that and take care of yourself.